Today we'll continue with part 2 of a trip, Ashley's return. Is there anyone here today that wasn't here yesterday? We got a few. Okay, I'll briefly get you up to date of where we're at right now. So Ashley and Henry were fur trade owners, and they sent men out west to trap for them. And Ashley, of course, was connected with the Hawkens because when he went out to supply his men, he needed a super Hawkens. Because he was tired of getting shot at by the Indians up on the cliffs and the high banks, and he couldn't reach him with his gun. So that happened, and so I'm going to take you through parts. The three of us, Amish, Staggs, Gerry, Lucky Messmer, Poncho, Mitch, we all decided, the three of us wanted to retrace Ashley's trail from his first rendezvous, which was out southwest Wyoming in 1825. And so we decided this in 2016, and we spent 2.5 years preparing for this trip, which we did in 2019. So there was 2.5 years of, you just don't go jump on a horse and do this trip. There was a lot of preparation, a lot of skins being tanned, clothes being made, tack being made. Everything that we had and took was a duplicate of what Ashley had as far as that period. So we gathered all this and a few others who would be in different phases of this trip. Quickly cover Ashley, what he did from the time he left the rendezvous with the furs he had gathered from his men. He traveled by horseback about 700 miles from southwest Wyoming, which present-day Lone Tree, Wyoming, just north of the Utah border, west of the Green River. And he went north to Montana to the Bighorn River. There they killed 24 buffalo, built buffalo hide boats, and floated up the Bighorn, the Yellowstone, to the Missouri. And then a flotilla of military keel boats. They then ditched the hide boats, threw the hides on, and went back. So we did the same thing. We went to the rendezvous site with horses, and after 2.5 years, we started that journey on July 6th. Ashley actually left on July 2nd, so our time frames were very similar. So we left on that ride, went through a lot of difficult times, lost horses in bogs, or they're called fens, floating sod above bogs, and went through the desert, tough times with no water, and we did the 700 miles, laying on the ground every night, hugging mosquitoes, all the way to almost to Montana. We couldn't finish into Fort Smith, Montana, because it was through Crow territory, and my wife, who tried many times when we were on this journey, the Crow would not let us cross their reservation. So we did not want to lose all of our equipment to the Crow and buy it back for twice the amount. Yep. So we had to end it there. So I think there we are. This is the last day of the ride. We pulled into this camp, and from here, we went to, you can go through there. We had a trailer around to Fort Smith, where we were going to start on the Bighorn. Okay, hold right there. We had a couple of days to rest and start on here, so we had been soaking our buffalo hide in the water, as well as some willow that we had brought with us, and we harvested some local willow as well. And then we took these and built them there, very close to the same site where Ashley had harvested 24 buffalo. So obviously we spent time repairing gear, switching out gear, and go ahead to the end. We started, you can go ahead and just go through each one. We used the willow, and we started building the buffalo hide boats, which we had spent some time in that 2.5 years learning how to build. Cutting skins, deer skin to use for lashing, and putting together a willow frame for a one-hub hide boat. So we had Two other guys that joined us on this part of the journey, we had acquired 2 buffalo hide for them. They had sewed 2 together and made more of a canoe-shaped buffalo hide boat. We also took what are called pirogues, handmade wooden boats, because we needed something that we could get through traveling through modern day, because we weren't able to shoot more buffalo and get more hide as we went along, or the journey had been over. So we had the pirogues as well, which were period correct to take along. We had 2 of those lashed together. So as we finished this boat, the other 2 guys showed up. We threw in our gear and went down to the Bighorn, which we were camped by. And that was a video. We don't need to play that necessarily right now, but go ahead and go on through there. We'll get, we had to sew some holes in the hides, which you can see through. Here are the 2 pirogues that we lashed together. And we actually got one of these 3 days before we left to go out west. So we had 3 days to seal them up, patch them up, and since they come from Louisiana, the guy that built them actually brought them up to Indiana, delivered them. We had to, they dried up and split and open, and we had to patch them up more. So this is the frame, the 2 hides we got the guys put together, a frame, threw the hides on, sewed them on the inside, lashed them, and brought out. So we can go up to, there's the 2 hide boat, Pete Peterson, 2 pirogues together. We take them out, lash them together in the water, and there should be a video coming up, some of the gear. There, play that one. Oh no, go ahead one where we depart. I think we're all in. I'm pretty sure that's there. Handmade fishing gear. Some of our fishing gear we used was horsehair, where we learned to twist horsehair together and make what's called snoodles, connect them, and used hand-made period flies, because this trip to the river was some of the best fly fishing in the world.
Where was that?
This is on the Bighorn River, just below the dam in Fort Smith. I guess we didn't have that video.
Have they done it? What's
Let's try that. I don't think so. So, one of our customs, every time before we left in the morning, we passed the jug,
May the river angels be with them.
fire water. I think that's it there. Yeah. So I think the first day we made 29 miles on the river. Amish was in the single hide boat the entire day. That changed. Oh, that play. That's okay. That's okay. So the first night, at the end of the first day, we ended at modern day diversion dam, which is not one we could have gone over with gear. We went river left. Amish and the other buffalo boat could not get over there, and they had to camp across the river that night, across from us, and we just used Indian Sign Language to talk. And no, everybody was okay. They were good for the night. And the next day, with the help of many people that were so kind to us and so willing to helped us portage around this dam down below where we met Amish and Denny and Pete in the 2 hide boat the next morning. So the evening before, we're watching these guys, and all of a sudden we see the little hide boat go over the dam with nobody in it. We're like, uh-oh, what's going on here? So that little boat got the name Little Runaway from that point, and we figured, you know, it's going to have an all-night run ahead of us. We'll never see it again. But actually the next day, 5 miles down the river, we found it wedged against the bank, retrieved it, and it made it all the way home. So there were times people were in and out of those boats. We traded, took turns in buffalo hide boat, pirogues. Here's a good picture of some buffalo meat that we took, and actually we could get 18 days out of this meat. Each evening we'd put it on a tripod we'd make and smoke that meat. So actually it lasted a long time. Probably a little longer than most of us would eat at home with a little snap test.
On the whole trek, how much trouble did you guys have with the camp?
Oh, good question.
How you camp?
Yeah, well, that was from state to state. A lot of times if it's considered a navigable river, you can camp up to the floodplain along and not be bothered. I believe that was the case in Wyoming. Yeah, and it might have been a little bit different in Montana, but we had so many people that you know, went out of their way to help us on this journey. So the days kind of run together, and so do the diversion dams. Some we were able to go over with gear. Here, that guy, go back one. The guy wasn't yelling for help. We just got across the diversion dam. It was very hot that day, so everybody stripped down, jumped in the river to cool off. So go ahead, Dan. There was one diversion dam in particular that was a couple of them that were very dangerous, and we had to take out on an island a bank, 10 foot straight up, empty gear, pull boats up, go, I don't know how far was it, Gerry? 300 yards, and then take them back down the large bunch of jagged rock to get our gear down in swift water, hold it, lash the pirogues together, get the buffalo hide boats in, and be able to continue the journey. Actually, Pete, great big Norwegian guy, he sat in the middle of those jagged rocks and become a human slide. You know, we'd slide the boats down his back and all the gear, and to get it down to be able to continue on the journey. So, Gerry, it's okay at this time. I'll let you take over and continue on our river trip.
Okay, so the first thing before I continue with the slides that I want to hit on is we all come to a rendezvous, and you walk around the camp and you see all the gear. And everybody, I mean, you're like, in the Army terms, we say you're a mechanized heavy brigade with all the pots and pans and everything. So for 95 days, we each had a kit similar to this. Right there is all I use for 3 months to eat, live on the trail. You know, you can make your, like when I'm alone, I make coffee in this, pour it in this cup, make my own here and cook it. This has a cloth that goes around it, it fits down inside there, it goes in my saddlebag. So, and then just a simple fork, spoon, and pig bristle toothbrush to clean the chopper. So when you're thinking about how much gear do you really need, you know, just think about 2,000 miles on the ground, and that's all the three of us really ate out of, is a kit just like that. Sorry traders, I'm one of them, but you don't really need all the gear. So go ahead and hit the next slide. So right here, this is, sorry, is that the tornado day?
No, that's Pete there. So.
Yeah. Okay, so traveling on, back to your question about people letting us stay on their land, everybody was extremely gracious and letting us stay on their land. And many times we'd be on the shore and a landowner would come down and he'd see us three dirty, nasty, smelling guys, and he'd of course want to know what's going on. So we tell him the story, and you know, next thing you know, they're bringing us elk meat, literally buffalo meat, all kinds of things to eat, and fresh water, whatever, you know. Didn't even ask for it, you know. I mean, we call those our angels, and we probably could have done this trip with no food on us. But for people that weren't here yesterday, the difference between our trip and Ashley's trip is Ashley could hunt his way down. We couldn't. We tried to get permits from different states, tell them what we were doing, and they denied it. So we had to carry all our own food, which was raw meat, and then dried food that we could rehydrate along the way. It's very interesting that as we look back at journals of William Ashley, you know, here we are, we're just kind of like all these pictures in awe of the scenery. It's beautiful on the Bighorn in Yellowstone. Day one, Amish is in the bull boat, and he had a blackberry go in the water behind them. We rounded a bend, and there's a cow elk in the bend with a calf, and just wildlife everywhere. And Ashley, no, he didn't really take notes on this journey, but later on knows it was a nondescript, uneventful, not that great looking terrain, and just kind of a trip to get back. We're seeing eagles and beaver everywhere, and you know, on the river we see almost nobody in total isolation. It was awesome. But there's our typical cooking scenario. You can see that it's a copper pot hanging over a tripod we took every day, and we make some kind of bull boat had to be propped up and dried out because that's how they traveled about 6 or 7 hours a day. Ashley's men, we saw from journals, and then would drive the bull boats out so the next day they could get back in the water. And the catamaran and the pirogues represents like Lewis and Clark and their dugout canoes. They would catamaran them together so they could travel and put gear in the middle. And then there's Amish catching some fish. We tried to sail. We stood up with a canvas and tried to get a sail to work. We were getting tired of rowing. Because you're rowing, because the rivers are flowing northwest of the Missouri, you know, you're going downstream, but you're into the wind every day, and so it gets old rowing on the river. So I don't know. They're hard to see, but the scenery is absolutely beautiful. And I don't know how they could make a note that it was nondescript territory, but it was probably between the ride and the river and the keel boat, and outside of the section on the keel boat, because of the route we had to take to avoid ranches and things. Okay. Yeah. Okay. This was probably the most true to what Ashley went through, because on the ride he could stay along the rivers and have grass, but now it's all fenced in private land. We had to go out into the red desert and work our way around. This is one particular day in August. We actually going down the river, and it starts to rain, and so we said, okay, let's pull off to the shore and let's hunker down for a little bit. And we got under some trees and put our rain ponchos over us, our oilcloth canvases, and basically rode out a rainstorm for a couple hours. The landowner named Ed Bile shows up, we explain what we're doing. He's like, oh yeah, you're fine, boys, no problem. A couple hours later, we decided that we're going to continue down the river, and we continued down the river, and the storm just kept following us. And we decided, it's hard to see, but we decided we need to pull off on this island and stop, because it's getting really bad, and the clouds are getting really black, and the rain is starting to come down. So we just pulled over on shore. I think we got a quick dinner in, and we had a fire, and we didn't build any shelters. We just laid down, the three of us, you know, me on one side, Amish and Camille and Jack on the other side, threw our canvases over us. Well, that night, the rain came down, and it was 80-mile-an-hour winds, and a tornado had come through. And the next day, Jack and I and Amish were all laying there awake, and you could hear the freight train over our heads, and we found out the tornado bounced over us and over the river. And I peeked out at one point, and when the winds were blowing, it was like a sandblaster in my face, and I watched the fire just go down the river. All the lumber and everything was just swept down the river. And so we got up the next morning, and we find this all out from locals afterwards. Oh yeah, it was 80-mile-an-hour winds, a tornado popped over the river right where you were. And it took us about an hour and a half to get a fire going and get a cup of coffee. There was nothing in our gear, there was nothing on that island that was dry. I mean, Jack and I were crawling through cottonwood, chopping from the bottom of the cottonwood, trying to find something down in there. Amish is out scrounging around looking, and we finally took a piece of char cloth and get a little stick down there. You know, we take turns blowing on the thing for about 40 minutes.
How long does it normally take so far?
About 2 minutes. Yeah, about 2 minutes. And that's the other thing to think about it. 95 days, at least 2 fires a day. And so that's 190 fires with flint and steel. So in perspective. But that was about an hour and a half, and I've never, and will never have a cup of coffee that was that good. That was awesome. I mean,
You try to use your gunpowder to get started?
No. Because black powder will flash, and no, we never did. You know, you might, if you have an unloaded gun, use your flint and frizz and get a spark on a char cloth, but never gunpowder. And we go back one. Thanks. So another thing to put it in perspective, 3 full moons, and a few days short of the 4th. That's 95 days, and you know you're kind of lost in time when you're sitting on a riverbank going, that's our 2nd full moon, boys. You know, and that's another thing I'll hit on real quick is, you know, this modern day of technology, everybody's got a cell phone, we're all connected to email, we all got to check the text messages, and you know, you just can't get away from anything. And it probably took the 3 of us a couple of weeks on a horseback ride. You know, we had to take phones and chargers because we had so much logistics. For the people that were here yesterday, we didn't have any chase vehicle. There was nobody following us to bring gear. nothing. So anything that we did along the way for resupply was either we walked into town, somebody gave us a ride, you know, we had to make phone calls to coordinate people flying in to pick up the horses, people, what day are we going to ride on the horses or on the boats to get to the keel boat. But other than logistical stuff, they stay tucked away, and it'll take you about a week or two to go through the withdrawals, get away from your cell phone. But once you do, it's pretty cool. This would be some of the high bluffs that Ashley was complaining about getting shot at, and why he needed a super Hawken. When you float by them, you can see why. They're up above you, they got a nice shot down to you, but you can't reach up there. Just some of that was about all of our gear right there. There's 3 piles, it's hard to see with the light. But, and we decided in this portion of the trips, if you go read Osborne Russell's, it's called 7 Years as a Trapper in the Rocky Mountains, I think is the title. Osborne Russell rides into a camp in January in the Rocky Mountains. Out of 23 trappers, 19 of them don't even have a blanket in January in the Rocky Mountains. So we said, it's August in Montana, let's go without blankets.
Wasn't we?
Yeah, Amish got to argue the point, but once the two of us were in, he's like, all right, knuckleheads. so we did the whole 400 miles without blankets. And in August, that sounds like, yeah, no big deal, but when you go from 80 or 85 degrees down to 40, that's a shocker. And you learn to cuddle rocks and get up tight to the fire and stay warm.
We did wake up with frost.
Yes, we did. Yeah, without blankets, it's pretty rough.
I told him, don't say one word.
Yeah, we heated rocks and put them down by our feet and stuff, but most of the time we were just ready to eat, gather enough firewood to reach over and put it on there and sleep. It was, and I don't know about these guys, but I can tell you that I lost about 37 pounds on this journey. So when you get done at the end of the day, you just want to eat, collapse, and be done. And you can just survive the cold. But kind of back to what Ashley didn't have to do that we had to do was the diversion dams. And for people that don't know about the diversion dams, they're just stone dams that bring the water level up at a certain point to feed irrigation ditches out into the farms. And what happens is there's hydraulics, and that water goes over, it goes and it turns in a circle, and it just, you know, it churns. So if you get caught in that, was it Forsyth? Which one?
Yeah,
Forsyth, and we got to that one. It was a very dangerous one, and just a month before we had been there, a professional kayaker, kayak guy, kayak trainer, there was a crowd there that dared him to go over. He went over it, he was successful, and they were daring him to do it again, and they found his body like 7 miles downstream. So they're nothing to mess with a kayak, let alone 2 pirogues. So we had to deal with that on the canoe portion of the river. But we, you know, again, just to go back, you know, at the diversion dams, I'll never forget one that Amish and I we walked up out of the river about 1.5 miles. Jack stayed with the gear. This one has a really long way around to get portage to get back to a put-in point, like 7 miles. So we walk up, you know, we're the same clothes we're wearing today, only, you know, we could whistle for them and they would come back then. And we just knock on a guy's door, and he's, you know, cooking fish, and he's like, we tell him the story. He's like, yeah, hold on a second, I'll put my fish back in the refrigerator. He puts his fish back, and he comes out, puts it in his trailer, we load up all our gear, and he takes us around and, you know, puts us back in. And so, just the, you know, just the total goodness of the people helping us along the way was amazing. It was very, very refreshing. You know, people were just really good, and we probably could have done it without food and ate just fine. You know, we would have had all the meat and things we needed. And at the very end of the river portion, this is where we came into the confluence of the Yellowstone River and the Missouri River, where now Fort Union is. We actually landed the same day, the same afternoon, August 19th, the afternoon of August 19th, that William Ashley landed. And that was not planned. And we camped on Fort Union for about 5 days, the same week that his men camped. Well, he went up with Atkinson further up the Missouri River to make treaties with the Blackfeet, and then he came back down and met his men. And while we were there, they didn't want us to stay in the fort. We wanted to fire. They didn't want to leave us in their insurance liability. And we're like, well, we'll just camp in the field. And so they said, well, we got a teepee we'll set up for you. And we're thinking, we're in high cotton here. We're going to get a teepee. So they came out, and there's this park ranger there. What's his first name? Bob. He was a regular. His last name was Yellowtail. And we started to tell him about Ashley's return. And he goes, stop boys, I know all about it. We're like, well, how do you know all about Ashley's return? He says, because my great-grandfather was one of the Arikara that attacked Ashley on horseback and killed a couple of his men. And I said, is this teepee going to stay up or is it going to burn to the ground? He's like, times are different, you're good. But his grandfather was born a mere 50 or 100 yards from where we were standing. At that time, there was, at any given time, 10,000 Indians there trading, and it was not a military force, it was a trading fort, and they had a village of log cabins, and his grandfather was born right on the field next to where we were. And it's just kind of crazy things like that. We also stopped, this is August 6th, no, we also stopped at one of our stops on the left side, on the port side of the river, just up a couple of 100 yards from Clark's stop in 1806 on his way back to meet Lewis at the Missouri River. And we have a picture, I'm in a big hollowed out cottonwood tree that's probably 4 or 5 feet in diameter that was probably there when they came through because it was so big. And some of the pictures, go back one real quick. Back one more. That's us in the teepee, but so the guy Ed Bile I'm telling you about that we stayed on his land in a tornado, he found out August 22nd was, my wife Kathy, raised her hand over there, that was our anniversary, and him and his girlfriend showed up with an anniversary cake for him. I mean, that's the kind of thing that people did for us. It's just amazing. This is sitting in Fort Smith. Some of the pictures, we spent 5 days there doing demonstrations. Jack's doing, making fish line out of horsehair, doing some interpretation. Leaf Halverson, one of our friends, we went to his school up there and did presentations at the school. His school actually allowed us to bring in guns and do fire starting and bring in the bullboat and talk to the kids there. And that's probably one of the coolest things about the whole trip is, we just started out. People say, why'd you do it? We're like, well, why not? We just wanted to do it, why not? But it ended up, everywhere we went down the line, becoming an educational thing for people. I'll bet we talked to tens of thousands of people in 95 days, giving them the history of William Ashley, what we're doing on a trip, teaching them, Amish would take kids and teach them fire starting, and all kinds of things. And people were very interested in the history and wanted to know all about it. Because there's a lot of people that you don't realize that the Missouri River was 3 feet deep and a mile wide. They see it today, and they think today is what it was, and it wasn't. We were traveling on a much different Missouri River than it was back then. And a lot of people don't realize that Ashley's trip, his rendezvous in 1825 really opened up the West for trade and expansion in a ginormous way. It was a life-changing thing in the United States, and then the Missouri River was a huge part of that. As the fur trade and rendezvous grew and the trade went west, it was a huge part. Yes?
Is he one of the ones that started it by the Green River?
Yeah. So his first rendezvous was off the Green River. Today's location, Lone Tree, which is literally a house and an old general store, I'm not kidding. Henry's Ford. Yep. It's right near Flaming Gorge, if you know that. No, that's Pinedale up north. Yep. This is a camp we got to. So as we finish up the canoe part, we had entertained going down Lake Sakawia. It's not Sacagawea, by the way, it's Sakawia. Lake Sakawia in pirogues, but we talked to local people and they're like, you'll never make it. It's too rough, the waves are too high, the wind's too strong, you'll never make it. So, and then with the keel boat, to go to meet the keel boat, there's 5 dams and lakes up above that obviously weren't there when Ashley went through it. The keel boat, which is right down there, was never, again, again, talking to people in marinas, would they have ported just around? You know, absolutely. But they said, you're not going to make it. Again, the waves are too high, the winds are too strong, and they're not lake boats, they're river boats. So why try to replicate something Ashley didn't do? The other thing is, once you take that out of the water, it's done. They knew the moisture content of the wood they were working with. They knew the spacing on the clapboards on the sides. They could fill them with oakum and tar, and then when it hit the water, they knew it would, you know, absorb water and expand and seal up. And if you take that out for 2 or 3 days into portage and it starts to dry, eventually it's never going to seal again and you're going to sink. So it wasn't worth the risk to do something that Ashley didn't do. So we ended up, the three of us, 2 weeks waiting on the keel. So think about a weekend rendezvous times 5, you know, just waiting on the keel boat. We actually had Kathy and Jack's wife, and then eventually Amish's girlfriend Shannon actually came out, resupplied us, and brought us some stuff. We spent 10 days in Yankton at the state park there. They let us camp out in kind of a backwoods area where we could have fires and do things and stuff. And we waited on the keel boat to come down. We had pictures of the keel boat simultaneously waiting to kind of lead in. This is, so for the people that weren't here yesterday, the keel boat, so we're at a rendezvous in 2017, and we're, the three of us are saying, well, we got to do the whole journey. So we'll just take the girls down the Missouri River. And we're like, you know, that's pretty stupid, really, if you think about it. Taking those girls down Missouri, that's not smart. But we got to do it anyways because we got to do the whole 2,000 miles. We're not stopping. So we're talking to a friend of ours, Bill Bailey, Captain Bill. He's like, I'll build a keel boat. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. It's on my bucket list. Who has a keel boat on their bucket list? Bill Bailey, apparently. So that boat was built not just by Bill, but Bill restores barns and cabins, and he's redoing the fort in Fort Lawton, or in Lawton, Oklahoma. And so Bill travels around 30, 45, 60 days at a time. So that boat was actually built on, he built the basic superstructure, flipped it over on the trailer, and built it on the trailer. He would go work at a client's place from 8 to 5, eat some dinner, turn on work lights, and work on that boat until midnight on the road, living out, you know, working on barns and cabins. And it took him about a year to build it. And so he was putting the finishing touches on it before he could meet us, and we ended up delaying a week, and we had to hold off, but he brought the muskrat down, and we're going to get into the muskrat tomorrow. Where am I at for time, boss? Somebody?
Bob had stepped away, but you still got about 20 minutes, 25 minutes.
Okay, good. So there was a lot of keel boats on the Missouri River that do tours, and one of the great builders is Butch Bouvier. And Butch has them, and there's other people that do keel boats and do tours, but because they have clients on them, they have to be built with different specifications so that they're safe, they don't sink, and, you know, they may use, you know, plywood, foam, steel, whatever for strength. Bill consulted with Butch Bouvier in a whole lot of books, and Butch coached Bill on techniques. This boat down here is built exactly like they were in 1825. There is no modern techniques in that. It's all just shrunk down half scale, and it's true to form. That thing leaked from the top, the bottom, the sides, everywhere. We spent a lot of time building it out, patching holes. What's that?
Yeah, the hand bumped in there.
No. So because that was over 30 feet, to put it on the Missouri River to license it, you have to have an automatic bilge. This is all by law. This is non-negotiable. Automatic bilge system, you must have a radio, you must have lights, you must have a first aid kit, a bathroom, which was a bucket with a lid, and you must have a boat. And life preservers. Yep. So all that had to be on there. The other difference is, keep in mind that a normal keel boat of the day would have had a minimum of 6 oars per side. But we couldn't build them that big, and we would have never found 12 guys to row oars for us. I mean, who's going to go do that for 900 miles? So, and people would say, oh, you used a motor. Well, yep, 1982 Evinrude that barely ran. And it was just enough to turn the front end to keep it moving and keep it off the banks. It's not like we had a 350 horse Johnson on there, you know, just barely a motor just to steer it, and we would use the oars and steer it and maneuver as best as we could. But
How many times did it actually think on you?
what's that?
How many times did it actually think on you?
Well, so William Ashley sank, the Muskrat sank twice in real life, but Ashley, and back then, again, the river's a mile wide, 3 feet deep, they unloaded it, rolled it over, and patched it. We basically had, we had one sinking, we classified it as sinking when the motor quit, and we crash landed shore into a bunch of snags and things, and it was quite an ordeal getting, I got into shore, got a rope with these guys, we pulled it in, and it just happened to be something in the motor that quit, and the current was so strong we couldn't maneuver with the oars. And then the other time, which we kind of consider this a sinking, we're cruising down the river and we come around the bend, and on Missouri, if you know some of the bridges, the railroad bridges that go across, the center section turns so boats can go through, ships can go through. But we came around the bend and it's closed, and it's only at that point the Missouri River was at 22 feet above flood stage. So if we would have gone under that bridge, it would have taken the cabin right off. So we had to do an emergency landing, maybe a quarter mile up river or less. Call the railroad, find a guy. He came down, he opened it, and turned it so we could get through. But we did actually sink when we first put it in. When we first put it in the water, and yanked it. It just started to fill up. And Bill walked over and we got it out. He says, "Oh, I think I know what the problem is. Modern 2x4s have rounded corners." He walks over and you can see where they cut out. He draws a couple lines. He's like, "Gerry, Amish, cut this board out right here and cut this one right out." Sure enough, we cut these 2 or 3 inch strips out, and there was the seam that we had to patch up. He knew right where they were, and then we were able to we put a hose in it then before putting it back in the water. Filled it up to get it to swell and make sure they didn't leak. So, yeah. So we had our share of incidents like Ashley did on the Muskrat. And then when we finished up the journey, we did stop at St. Charles versus St. Louis because we didn't want to get into commercial traffic. Well, let me back up. It's another funny story. So keep in mind, 22 feet above flood stage. Nobody on the water. We're seeing news reports that they're closing the river down to boat traffic, and we're thinking, journey's over, we're going to be done. They're going to throw us off and never make it. So we're cruising down the river, and all of a sudden this game cop and a boat comes up behind us, a couple of 350s, pulls up next to us, and he says, "Where are you going, boys?" Jack says, "St. Louis." He's like, "Yeah, no, really, where are you going?" Jack says, "We're going to St. Louis." And he's like, got real serious, like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, pull over, we'll tell you the story." So we're just sitting there thinking, I'm over on the side talking to Bill Bailey, like, this is it, we're gonna get pulled off the river. But he didn't. He handed us cards that if you need anything, let me know, and then he took off and let us go. But that was all. We'll get into more of that tomorrow. There's some other funny stories with the keel boat. But the canoe part leading up to it was very quiet, very serene, a lot of eagles, a lot of beaver. We did some fishing, got some catfish, some mountain whitefish. About 400 miles on canoes, 700 on horse, and 400 on canoe, and then 900 on the keel boat. Got some squirrels, some other things along the way that we ate. But all in all, it was a lot of work. Some really tough times because again, you're going into the wind, and we had one particular bridge where we were probably from, maybe here to that building down there from a railroad bridge, and we're going into the wind, 40-mile-an-hour winds, and Jack's on the back on the rudder going, "Come on, boys, row!" And Jack and I, or Amish and I, are up there about ready to smack it with a paddle. And we said, when we get to that bridge, no matter what time of day it is, we're stopped. And we made it about 2 hours later, and we went up on the shore. Once again, we met this great landowner, Dan Thompson, and he said, "Do we need anything in town?" And we said, "Yeah, we can use a few things if you want to pick them up for us." He's like, No, you take my truck. And I said, "Well, is there anything you need in town?" And he just said, "Yep, a truck back." So he sent us into town, and we got some supplies. And he was a wealth of information. So I made the flip comment about, I wonder if the bighorn in Yellowstone look anything like they did when Ashley went through. And he said, funny you should say that. He went in his bedroom and he pulled out some 1850s maps, copies of them, and had all the depth measurements, so they knew in the braided river where to go. And there was only a 2-mile stretch that had been gravelled for the railroad. And he said, other than that, the river is the same, other than Mother Nature changes. And he had some artifacts he found in the river. He had a keelboat anchor or a steamboat anchor that, when the river was down, it was like right in front of his house. He picked up, and just a wealth of knowledge. Yeah, so he let us sleep in his horse pasture, which was nice. It was green grass, and so we were out there and laid all our gear out. We went to sleep, and in the middle of the night, I could hear it, the hoofs coming. And I jumped up and they said, stampede! And then about that time they got up and we started waving our arms, and about 6 or 8 of his horses went right through our camp. Splattering gear everywhere. And,
made it authentic, I guess.
Huh?
Made it authentic, I guess.
Oh, pretty authentic, yeah. But lucky none of us got, run over. It could have been pretty tragic. What else are some of the other funny ones on the canoe? Yeah. So we were, ran into a poker for guys that ride motorcycles. They have poker runs. We rounded a bend on the river, and there's a poker run, and there's like 100 boats in the water, and so we're floating down with them, but most part of it was just very quiet, very serene. It was very nice. Every quarter mile was a pair of eagles, and just very enjoyable. So, guys got anything? We're going to some questions. We didn't have a lot of time yesterday for questions, so on any part of this journey, if you want to hit some questions, we would love to answer some questions. Yeah.
I was able to be here yesterday. Can you tell us about the Super Hawken?
So the Super Hawken, what we know about it, actually Bob Woodville is here, and there's a Super Hawken in the Hawken cabin. So when Ashley went out in 1821, 22, somewhere in there to do some scouting, he, couldn't range the Indians on the cliffs, so he wanted a bigger rifle with longer range. So he came back to the Hawkins brothers and said, I need and actually, Bob was saying they used the word super back then, and he did say, I want a Super Hawken. And from near as we can tell from, who knows what's right and stuff. But, so he built a 69 caliber. He wanted, the specifications were he wanted a 1-ounce ball, which translates to a 69 caliber. The notes that we've seen said a 3.5-foot barrel, so that's a 42-inch barrel. And then it had a military lock and a military butt plate. And then the trigger guard was kind of like a trade gun, which had more room in it for gloves. And there's actually a copy of it down there, and that's what Ashley carried. We think it was made around 1822, 1823. But nobody knows where the original is. Ashley, yeah?
I think that was in Baird's book, and that was a quote from Sam later in life about that Super Hawken.
Yeah.
Like in the 1870s or something like that.
Right, I think that's where we actually got
Because I remember
the description.
sending Jack information on that. I think that's where that Super Hawken name came from, was Sam later in life had
Yeah.
quoted that.
Questions?
Now, was it drinkable back in those days?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they didn't have any trouble.
Well, you can boil it. Can you boil it?
You can boil it. Yeah, but we want to make 2,000 miles to be sure we took a filter.
This is very good.
Yeah. So, guys, anything else you can think of on the portion? Questions? So, and then for those that weren't here, well, I don't know if we mentioned this yesterday. So, because we didn't have a trail vehicle or anybody following us with equipment or tracking us, we did take a Garmin, and every night Jack would turn on and send a ping to his wife on a computer, so she knew a 10-digit grid coordinate where we were, and then we would turn it off. And then if you have a catastrophic injury, you turn it on and you hit the 911 button, and they send a helicopter or something. And that was the one thing that we did do to make sure we had an ability to get somebody out, because so many things could have gone wrong at this point up through the horseback and the canoe
Did you
part.
have to hit the panic button?
Huh?
Did you have to hit the panic button?
Nope. Nope. In fact, the three of us did 95 days on the ground. None of us even so much as cut a finger in camp. So, no, we didn't have any injuries or anything. It was kind of amazing.
Back in those days. That
Take it.
would have been a nice trip back in those days.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's a write a diary, so people 500 years from now.
We did. So, speaking of that, good point. If you go on Facebook, there's a page called Ashley's Return, and you can go to the bottom and you can scroll up and see the whole journey in chronological order, including while we're out doing the first two sections. Bill Bailey built the keel boat. You can see the progress of the keel boat. And then last year, we did combine our three journals. Every single day, we recreated the same 95 days and put our journal entries in so you could see what was happening each day through the whole 95 days. But there's quite a bit edited out of there because we want to write, we're in the process right now of writing the book, and there's a lot of things we want to put in the book, and we didn't want to do spoilers. And if you're get the Muzzle Blast magazine and go back to last year, October, November, December, January, February of this year, there's 5 articles that we put in there that talks about the beginning of the journey and then each segment of the journey. So they're pretty cool.
You still have one in Mike and book?
No, I think it kind of rotted. Yeah, it didn't. We were going to donate it to Nebraska City. Yep. We'll make another one. But they were throwaway for them. Build and throw away. Yes, there were. Yep. Good? 4 minutes? 4 minutes for more questions. Yes, sir.
What's next?
You have to ask my wife.
Going to last tour.
Okay, so what's next? So there's a little bit of talk in here about 2025 being the 200th anniversary of Ashley's return. So we usually do a week somewhere near Rendezvous, so there may be a ride out to that actual rendezvous site. Some bull boats descending the Green River to it, so we'll see. It'll be the younger guys, I'm a little too old now.
But, and so folks over here yesterday too, you know, there were a lot of questions we get. I'll kind of finish up with this so we can get on the next group. But people ask, you know, why did you do it? You know, and really the answer is why not? I mean, you know, when you're old and sitting around and you can't do these things, you can either have regrets or you can have memories. And we decided, you know, we had nothing to prove to anybody, not even to each other. It was just a trip we wanted to do. You know, keep in mind, they're all 20 years old. You know, at the time we went, Amish is mid-40s, I'm mid-50s, he's mid-60s. So we're more than 2 times older than them. For us, it was just a younger 40s. Okay, he was in his younger 40s. Yeah. So it was all about just could we do it, you know? And I was retiring from the Army. Jack was retiring from his business. Amish owned his own business so he could get away. And we just said, why not? We had no idea people along the way would even know we were coming and they would pass the word. We had no idea, you know, any of these things would happen, and we just did it. And said, why not? You know, and it was great. It was a lot of fun. So, gear. What's that? Yeah, gear. We talked about the eating gear, and then up here, Jack's got a saddlebag for the back of the horse. We carried a Colt Patterson, which we have documentation of 2 Colt Patterson pistols and Patterson rifles going into the fur trade in the late 1830s, about 1838 or 39. They went to the Rockies. There's documentation of that. And also, you kind of want more than one shot where you're out in the middle of nowhere and you don't know who you're going to run into. You know, the old days of a Hawken knife is kind of outweighed with somebody with a semi. So, you know, you got to have a little self-defense. A pack, basket, Jack carried the whole the canoe portion, the keel boat, but very little gear. And so when we were packing up, you know, you basically took the clothes you had on, and then these 2 guys had 1 spare shirt between them, and you know, had a spare pair of moccasins, and then maybe another pair of pants or something. But that was it. Yeah, we took the rifles, yep. Rifles and knives and fire starting and then basic living gear. All right, about fire rate model?
Yep.
All right, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And,